Hello and welcome to NCBI Labs.
You're very welcome to another NCBI Labs live event, which brings up to live at number 39 in our series. So this is JP Kirk, which is today from the Labs team. I'm standing in for my colleague Jude Maher, and I'm joined today by our regular panelists Sean Doran and Joe Lanigan. So I hope everyone listening in is managing to stay safe and well. As it turns out, it happens to be 1 year of this very week since we recorded our first live event ever during lockdown number 1. And now here we are 12 months later in the midst of yet another lockdown. Well, as always, the Labs team is here to keep our regular technology live events going throughout these very challenging times. So what do we have coming up for you in the show today? Well, in a short while, we're going to be exploring the area of accessibility with Microsoft. So, for example, what are some of the latest accessibility features in Windows 10 and Microsoft Office for someone who is blind or has a vision impairment? How exactly does artificial intelligence work, and how is it used to develop popular apps like Seeing AI or make existing Microsoft products that a bit more accessible for the sight loss community? Well, joining us today to help answer these questions and more is Stephen Howell, who's the accessibility lead for diversity and inclusion at Microsoft Ireland. So we're really looking forward to chatting with Stephen in just a short while. Also this week on Meet the Team, we're going to be talking to our regular live event host, Jude Maher, to find out about his role in NCBI. So after interviewing everyone else on the Labs team, Jude finally gets a chance to be interviewed himself. As always, if you have any questions throughout the show, you can leave them in the Q&A panel directly in the live event, or you can just send an email to labs@ncbi.ie and I'll make sure to get straight back to you. Before that, as I mentioned a moment ago, we've pretty much had all our Meet the Team interviews over the last few months in that section of the live events. But today we're going to be speaking with someone who's no doubt you'll have be very familiar with because he's the regular host of our live event. It's Jude Maher. Since we introduced the Meet the Team segments in our live events a few months ago, Jude has interviewed, as they almost did in full live, almost the entire live event team. But up to this point, he hasn't actually been interviewed himself. So just when he thought he was off the hook, I caught up with Jude last week to record his own Meet the Team interview, which we're just about to play for you now. Okay, so over the last few months on our live events, we've had a chance to meet with almost everyone from the NCBI Labs team to hear about the work that they're involved in and a bit about their background too. But there's one person who up to now we haven't yet had a chance to speak with on Meet the Team, and that's because he's the regular host of our show. So Jude, it's great to finally have you on Meet the Team.
Yeah, it's a little bit odd to be this side of the interview, but yeah, really good to be on the show. Thanks,
Yeah,
JP.
Great to have you here. Now, I know at one stage, Jude, we actually had considered the idea of you interviewing yourself for Meet the Team. But
people have had enough of me.
Yeah, I think as funny as an interview as it could have been, I think we figured it might not be the best way to proceed with that one.
I would have given myself too easy a time.
So just Jude, to start with, could you tell us a bit about how long you've been with NCBI and whereabouts you're currently based?
Yeah, so actually I was just thinking about this the other day. It's since November 2006 I've been with NCBI, so it'll be 15 years this year, which is amazing actually. I'm working in the Western region at the moment, so between Mayo and Galway is the areas that I look after, but that's kind of the last 4 years or so. I actually started over in the southeast region. So I was working with Maureen Lanigan for a little while and working from Wexford, and then I was working in Kilkenny for a while, working in Waterford for a while as well, up until about 4 years ago when a colleague, a lot of people might remember him actually, Francis Kane, was working up in the Western region, and he left NCBI. So I came up to the Western region and have been looking after Galway and Mayo since.
Excellent to fill that position, Jude, was it?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's it.
Excellent, great. And what about life before coming to NCBI then, Jude? Could you tell us a bit about your background, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so I grew up in Carlow, actually. I was born, funnily enough, in the Mayo area, so I'm back into the area that I was born in. But I grew up around Carlow and went to college to study. I kind of didn't know what I wanted to study when I went to college. I studied arts, which seemed to be a good kind of placeholder. And funnily enough, the one subject that I wasn't majorly keen on that I took at that time was to do with information systems. I didn't really have the bug for that subject at all. But funnily enough, afterwards, I got into I did a few more kind of practical courses afterwards. I was doing, so I started doing my ECDL, and I kind of had a little bit more of an affinity with technology at that stage. But as part of that, I went on to do a training diploma. So I did what was called, it was the Joint Education Board, the JEB training diploma. And I found that was the thing that really kind of appealed to me, was the whole structure of how to train a subject properly, how to get somebody from point A to point B, and for it to make a real difference in their life. So that was the kind of training thing, the training side of technology was what really got me interested in technology. I actually started doing quite a lot of training coordination, and I started actually training that course as well, the teaching diploma as well, which was quite an interesting one to do.
Okay.
But that kind of got me back into technology a bit more, and I went back to college, did a bit more on technology, and after that I was working with the EPA in Wexford for a little while, until the opportunity to get back into training came up with NCBI.
Excellent. And that was 15 years ago, you were saying?
That's it, yeah. 15 years ago, started with NCBI.
Right.
15 years this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, Jude, I know you're obviously heavily involved in hosting our technology live events, but if it weren't for the live events, what would your role typically entail?
Yeah, so sort of similar to what a lot of the trainers have mentioned in the last few weeks. There's a lot to do with kind of assessing need, assessing what somebody's technology needs are, and then trying to also build maybe a training plan where that's necessary, doing a lot of training, whether that's one-to-one or group work. That would have been kind of the key elements, I suppose, of the role, particularly before the pandemic. But that's kind of evolved a little bit. That's changed a bit in how it's delivered. But we still managed to do a bit of the same work. I would do less of that now with the live events, particularly, than I did maybe just over a year ago. But there's still that service user contact, which is really enjoyable, because a lot of it is there's a limited amount of different technology, I suppose, that's out there, or even categories that's out there. There is a lot, but it has a limit. So it could seem sort of samey all the time, that you're working with these same programs, these same pieces of technology. But because people's the challenges that people face, but they're also the interests that they have are so different, it actually makes it quite an enjoyable thing. You're kind of trying to work through something with each individual as to what they really need, but also what they want. I might identify something that might be an amazing piece of technology, but if the person doesn't have the interest in what that technology will allow them to do, it's not necessarily the right piece of equipment for them. So it's always kind of a bit of a journey of discovery with each individual service user as well. And then the training side of it as well, of course, that was a key part of it. And as I say, there was kind of training of all sorts of different things. I think a few of the other trainers have mentioned a lot to do with software programs, or different pieces of technology, or smartphones, or all of these different things are involved in that as well.
Of course. And Jude, when you were training, would that have been like one-on-one training, or would it have been training in groups, or both?
Yeah, so there was a bit of both. It really depended on what the need was. So sometimes you've got maybe a program that you can run that is a need that exists among a big group of people. You can invite people in, and there's maybe 4 or 5 people who have the same sort of level of interest, same background, same skills, and that works really well. But sometimes that will give rise to maybe some more individual training afterwards as well, that somebody needs a specific thing. But to be honest, it kind of comes out in a few different ways. For example, I did a little bit of awareness training for a little while before as well, and I used to really enjoy that element. That would pretty much always be the group work, but you'd be meeting people who it was actually just a really interesting process to try and challenge the expectations that people have when it comes to the difficulties that someone with sight loss faces, and to be able to actually just work through some of those expectations and trying to help somebody to understand, okay, actually, just because you might expect somebody to be able to see this or not to see this doesn't mean your expectation is right. That was quite an interesting aspect of that kind of training as well.
Of course, of course. And Jude, at the moment, is there anything in particular that you're working on, or any particular project work that you're involved in that you can tell us about today?
Do you know what? The main thing is actually the live events. It takes up a huge amount of the working week. I work part-time, so it kind of fits in very, very nicely with that. But for each live event that we've got, as you know yourself, there's an awful lot of research that goes into each live event. So it might be research on a particular piece of technology, making sure that we know what we're talking about when we're actually going to talk about it on the live event or interview someone. But there's also a lot of other things involved with that. There's the planning meetings that we have trying to work out what would actually be of interest to people, who we can get on to talk about a particular piece of technology. Some of the interviews have been brilliant. That's kind of come as a result of maybe the planning sessions, and as you know yourself, you've been great with getting on to getting a lot of the interviewees onto our live events. So that's kind of the planning part, but then there's an awful lot of post-production as well, if you like.
That's true.
So some of our videos have to be created, they have to be edited down for the live event, and then afterwards they have to be edited as well for maybe the YouTube channel, or trying to index those pieces. There's a lot that goes on with it.
Exactly. It takes up a good bit of time, and it's just trying to stay a few weeks ahead, isn't it? In terms of upcoming shows, making sure we have guests, and keeping interesting topics coming all the time.
That's it, and to be honest, it's one of those things as well. We kind of have to be quite flexible. We've had a couple of situations where maybe we were hoping to have a guest on, and maybe something's understandably come up that they weren't able to join us, or it might have been technical problems. You kind of have to be, you have to work on your feet quite well. You have to be quick on your feet with it, which is where the team comes in really well, because we've got, like, obviously yourself and Daniel and Sean and myself. All four of us are kind of on the go during any one live event, and it helps to keep it the whole kind of flow of it very smooth as well.
Yes, exactly. Great. Jude, I have this one final question before we finish. I know we're fast approaching live at number 50 in our series, and I wonder, do you have any highlights from previous shows that you've hosted that you could share with us today? For example, any particular interviews that stand out for you?
Yeah, it's incredible actually how many of the live events we've gone through already, but it's there's a lot to choose from. I think in terms of interviews, probably the standout one for me was just being able to talk to Stuart Lawler, and probably for a lot of the same reasons as I mentioned about the awareness training, in that it kind of challenges expectations, even my own expectations sometimes. So as I was chatting to Stuart in that interview, just being able to see his overall perspective of where technology has got to at this point, but also what's still needed, what's still possible with technology. I find that a really interesting interview, and Stuart, of course, expresses himself so well as well. So that was a really interesting one for me. But I would say, as well as that, I would say one of the kind of regular segments that I quite like is probably the what you need to know sections. So things that are kind of maybe fairly mundane in some ways, but like how to get the most out of your internet connection, or what you need to know if you're going to buy a laptop, or when there's sales on, how do you make sure you get the best out of it. And I quite like those discussions, because they're not necessarily single pieces that we have, that you can just learn everything about. Every conversation we have about those sort of things brings in 3 or 4 different viewpoints and perceptions, and you have a really good discussion about the pros and cons of different elements. And you always end up coming out of it kind of having picked up a bit more, even if you knew already, you pick up a bit more with those kind of discussions. So they'd probably be the highlights for me.
Exactly. Yeah, excellent, great. I enjoyed that part of the show too, and I think we've had a lot of interesting guests on the show. And yeah, certainly one of my personal favorites is the Seeing It Your Way interview that you did with Stuart Lawless. And I'd certainly recommend our listeners to check that interview out as well on YouTube if they haven't done so already. So great. Well, Jude, thanks a lot for taking the time to talk to us today and meet the team. And we really look forward to having you back next week on our live event, hosting the show then. Thank you.
Thanks very much, JP. And, you know, I just wanted to say I always wanted to be on a live event, so I'm glad I got the opportunity.
There you go. Nice one. Thanks again, Jude.
Great. That was interesting talking to Jude on Meet the Team this week. So, as I mentioned a moment ago, it's been exactly 1 year this week since we recorded our very first ever NCBI Labs live event. And over this time, we've had a chance to talk about lots of different types of inclusive technologies for people with sight loss and meet with several guests along the way too. But as it turns out, this week also happens to be the 45th anniversary of the founding of Microsoft by Bill Gates and Paul Allen. So if we go back to April 4th, 1975, at a time when most people were still using the good old-fashioned typewriters, this is also when Bill Gates and Paul Allen set out in their ambitious goals to have a computer on every place, on every desktop and every home throughout the world. A vision which obviously today has become very much a reality as well. In the intervening years, diversity and inclusivity have played an integral role at Microsoft as the company works to ensure that all its products and services are designed to be fully accessible for everyone, including people with sight loss. And well, to learn more about this, we are joined today by Stephen Howell, who is Accessibility Lead for Diversity and Inclusion at Microsoft Ireland. So Stephen, you're very welcome to the show today.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Well, to start with, Stephen, could you tell us a bit about your own role in Microsoft and whereabouts it fits into the overall structure of accessibility in the company?
Absolutely. So I'm not doing accessibility for my day job, unfortunately, but it's becoming such a huge part of my role. I nearly feel that it's becoming an integral part of what I do. So my day job for Microsoft, what they actually expect me to come in and do every day is I'm the academic evangelist, which is a very funny title, and I'm not sure what it is either. But for nearly 8 years, I've been going out to universities, and now with COVID, virtually to universities and colleges and institutes of technology, and supporting the academics there with a range of things, mostly like programming and artificial intelligence and all sorts of computer sciencey stuff. But more and more accessibility questions have been coming our way. And at first it was sort of an extra thing I did because I like doing it. And as I learned more and more, it actually became part of my volunteer work at Microsoft. Because you mentioned diversity and inclusion, and everyone in Microsoft, everyone is involved in some way with diversity and inclusion. It's a core requirement of the job, and my small contribution is accessibility.
Accessibility. Thanks, Stephen. I wonder, Stephen, could you talk through some of the different accessibility features and offerings in Windows 10 that are currently available for specifically for people who have low vision or who are blind, and for example, like focusing on some of the ease of access kind of settings like Windows Magnifier, Narrator, those kind of tools.
Absolutely, and I'd like to share my screen for this, if that's okay with the podcast team. So I'm just going to share it now. And I'm going to share it with sound because some of the features I'll be doing, like Narrator, will require sound.
Great.
And I'm sharing my whole desktop, and that's right in front of me here. I have a number of monitors on my desk, mostly for doing these type of things we're doing now, because my job is presenting, usually coding, but something all the time. And one of the things that has become very interesting during COVID is many people are now doing their presentations, be it for college or work, online. And I have 4 kids at home here, and they were going to school online. And my youngest is 10, Molly, and I heard Molly one day explaining to the teacher how to share their screen, and I just thought it's an amazing. It used to be the teachers trying to get the kids to learn technology, and now the 10-year-olds are explaining in Teams, this is what you do. So we've come a long way.
Yes.
But what I'm sharing right now is just one of my desktops, and I know that many of your listeners know an awful lot more about screen readers and JAWS and NVDA and all sorts of these cool and amazing technologies, much more than I do. And I totally accept that you have an expert here who's not an expert. And I would say is, accessibility is, a huge spectrum of possible user interface challenges you could have. That includes physical and neural, and there's so many different challenges you can have when it comes to using a computer. So our goal here is not necessarily to have a single system which is only fit for a certain type of human being who uses the computer in a way that we expect them to. We have to make it that our software and our operating systems and our technology generally is as usable and accessible to as many people as possible. So this has been a significant push, and it happens in 3 ways. So when I'm showing these features, keep in the back of your mind that sometimes a piece of software is developed from scratch, and nowadays accessibility should be built into it from the start. And it'd be very hard nowadays, for us anyway, to produce a piece of software that was completely inaccessible.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good point.
But there's some older programs out there, and some of you, use them every day, and the accessibility features are still being added to them, sometimes slowly over time. So it is quite possible that some of the programs you use, you're going to say, I wish it had this feature, and Stephen just showed this feature. Why can't it be in my favorite program? And what I would say is, in everything I'm showing here, we do appreciate feedback and we do listen to it. And even though I mightn't be on a development team making the feature you want, I can feed information back to those teams. So even if I can't do the code for you, I might be able to send a message to the right people. So I'm going to start with the one that we tell people who are learning accessibility on Windows 10 in particular for the first time, brand new computer, you haven't set up anything yet. And that's the Ease of Access Center. Okay. And I've just kicked off the Ease of Access Center by pressing Windows key and U on my keyboard. And you can see what has popped up straight away. And currently I don't have narrator on, but narrator is actually one of the items that the Ease of Access Center lets me configure. So if I want to switch on something like narrator, and as a normal daily use, narrator isn't on your computer, but you probably know the shortcut key to switch it on. And there are different shortcuts.
Settings window, narrator dialog, OK button, heads up. Narrator keyboard changes. We've updated the narrator keyboard layout. So
now, I've stopped it there because you've probably heard that before. I switched on the Windows narrator with my keyboard shortcut, which on my computer is Windows key, Control and Enter, and immediately it popped up. And I've told it, always show me the heads up narrator keyboard changes. Now, it reads them out. I've stopped it by pressing Control key. And even though what I've just described there is very simple and obvious to probably everyone listening to this, all of you, to me, as someone who didn't have to use the narrator until a friend of mine, Donal Fitzpatrick, and I were doing a presentation together, and Donal wanted to show off certain features using artificial intelligence, and I wanted to demonstrate on my computer. But Donal's computer would have lots of advanced software. My computer was just plain Windows 10. So he was able to tell me just straight away, just press these keys and up it comes. And, it was amazing to me because I was learning. But what I want to show with the Ease of Access Center here is...
Don't show again, checkbox unchecked. OK button, settings window, home, but search bar, vision, display, selected.
That the number of selections are from display, mouse pointer,
text cursor, magnifier, color filters, high contrast, narrator.
Now I wanted to get down to narrator.
Make text bigger. Drive the slider until the sample text is easy to read. Then click apply. Slider at 1 hop.
I forgot to press enter on narrator.
Selected. Narrator.
To me, being able to set up everything from one location, and this is the Ease of Access Center. Yeah. So, for example, on this screen, I have allowed the shortcut key to start narrator. You can imagine in certain circumstances, you wouldn't want certain keys to start certain things, but also have it sign in if it's me signing in, if I'm always using it, or sign in for everyone if this is a computer used in a center where you might need narrator on for everyone, or various settings. And you'll notice that the main thing I've changed is the Irish voice. The default was George, who I think is English, United Kingdom, and I've changed it to Sean, which is English, Ireland. Yeah. Now, Sean's a bit of a robot voice, and I'm told for screen readers that's a good thing because you can read them and understand them at high speed. And I've increased the speed to 12 here, and I'm finding that hard to follow, but I'm a complete amateur compared to Donal, who listens to it at hyper speed. But to me, that's the speed I can just about keep up with. and I like Sean's robot voice. But we actually have new AI voices which have come out, which may not be great for screen readers, but are really good for reading other content like audiobooks and the news to you. So we're seeing advances even in something that is quite simple concept, narrator, but infusing, as we say, AI into it, like with artificial intelligent voices that can do emotion and detect when they're reading something like, this is a news article, I should be serious, or this is something else, I should be more frivolous. And that to me is absolutely incredible. And again, it's not just blind and low vision, there's also hearing and interaction. Sorry.
Yeah. It's great. It's great to have that kind of customization. Would you be able to give us an example of one or two things? I know we were talking earlier about how that could be implemented in some of the tools in Windows. Could you show us that today, Stephen?
Well, I'd like to just show a quick one.
Narrator dialog.
Is
button.
the magnifier.
Settings window. Use narrator. Turn on narrator. Toggle switch on.
So when I often actually use magnifier, and I'm going to use Windows key plus here. And what Windows key plus does for me is allows me to start the magnifier. So the magnifier is actually started. It's on a different screen, a little toolbar. And what it allows me to do in my daily presenting of my screen to students and professors is to zoom in on the piece of code I want them to read. But I'm also aware that I'm on a really large resolution, and sometimes when you put that into Teams and send it over the cloud, the end user mightn't have a big monitor like me. And they might be struggling to see it. So the magnifier is actually useful in a number of contexts. So if I click on magnifier in our ease of access center, there is a range of customization you can do, and the new features that I'm particularly I particularly am using probably more than anything else is you can
narrator dialog. OK button. Heads up.
I'm going to
narrator
show
settings window. Vision color filters selected. Magnifier select.
You notice I've just been clicking around there and it instantly starts reading. If I'm on a body of text, I can get it to read from the mouse pointer. So that's the modifier key, which on my computer is Alt-G-R, but might be different on yours, and a left mouse click, and it'll start reading from that point. But I can also say, go back to the previous sentence or go to the next sentence. Now, again, these are features that, are obvious probably to many people, but for someone like me learning the keyboard shortcuts, they're invaluable. And I guess the takeaway here is, there's a big long list of keyboard shortcuts, and it can be hard to learn all of them. But once you get good at those keyboard shortcuts, and I maybe was lucky that I started using a computer before mice were invented. That makes me very old, I know. But I'm only 2 months younger than Microsoft, so mice are kind of a new thing, So to me, if you can learn the keyboard shortcuts, and again, if I'm doing zooming, so if I
magnify window, zoom in button.
I'm zooming in here at a huge rate, and hopefully that's coming through on what is going over to Teams. I'm not sure how well that comes across, but I'm zooming in at 300% here. So the text is much, much larger. But I also have contrast settings on, and this is for me personally, even though I don't have low vision, but I do find it difficult to read text unless the what's the word I'm looking for? The contrast is right. So I'm in a very bright room, and even those contrast settings work for me.
Yes. And one of the features, I know there's a few features that were introduced, and I think it was the spring update of Windows last year. We saw, for example, there were enhancements to Windows Magnifier, new features added there, like the read from here feature. Also, I think there were some improvements made to narrator, as well as I think there were color filters added for their mouse and pointer customization options. And I think one of the things that I used to come across personally, I suppose, from chatting to several service users, that they've been hugely impressed by these enhancements and new features. So whereas in the past, a lot of people might have tended to move towards third-party software and purchasing third-party software for Windows, very often they're finding that the built-in accessibility features in Windows will suffice. So which is great, very welcome.
No, it's an interesting challenge that there are some businesses that for security reasons, they won't let you install any software, and you can get a job and you're really excited and you start to work and you're told, oh, sorry, we can't install anything unless it's like, vetted by a committee. And you're like, okay, but I need it to do my job. It needs to be at least something to get you working,
So I know people were saying, JP, that they'd love if the Magnifier had like a focus indicator while they're on a website, that if they're using the read function on Magnifier, like a little red box would be around what's being currently read, and that way they can follow the focus on the website. That would be like.
That's a really good idea, and we do focus and follow when we're using Immersive Reader, and I think that would be an excellent addition to the Windows Reader. And I might show that later on in Word and OneNote if that's of interest.
Great. Great. That's great. Thanks for pointing those out. And what about some of the other accessibility features in Office? I know we're talking about for things like the accessibility checker, Immersive Reader, which you just mentioned, and Office Dictation. Maybe, even things like generating alt text in PowerPoint and in Word. I wonder, would you be able to talk to us about those features too, please?
Well, absolutely. So I have Word here, and as you can see, this is a very blank document. So if I was going to demonstrate anything with this, first of all, I need some text. So the features that we're getting the most feedback in accessibility about right now are two things. One is the new Dictate, for talking to Word instead of typing in Word, and the other is the Immersive Reader. So I'd like to show Dictate because, and this ties in very nicely with the AI story. So as I said earlier, some products are being built from the ground up with AI features and accessibility, and some products like Word, who, no offense to Word, but it's a very venerable application. It's been around a while now, and it's not older than me, but I imagine there's some listeners where it's certainly older than them. And the thing about Word is that it's very extensible. Things get added in, and it might be challenging to add everything in, but as you can see, there's a few new buttons on the toolbar that you mightn't have come across before, and one of them is Editor. Now, I'm not going to demonstrate Editor today, but I know
Microsoft Word dialog. OK button. You have finished reviewing editor suggestions. Document 1, Word window.
Now, I've just clicked that, and what happened is I was inside Word, and it opened up a side panel when I clicked the Editor button. And the Editor button gives me suggestions for my writing, including spelling and grammar. But they're common ones. We all have had the experience of being told we can't spell by Word. But clarity, conciseness, formality, inclusiveness, punctuation conventions, sensitive geopolitical references, and vocabulary. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not a great writer. I have to work hard on that, and being told that I'm not being formal enough or inclusive enough is a good warning to have before I publish something. But I want to talk about Dictate. So I think this might be of interest. So remember I mentioned AI. So there is Windows Dictation, which you may have used before. It opens up a little bar and you press a button and it gives you dink noise and you speak away. With this is slightly different. What Dictate is doing is it's using artificial intelligence to understand me, and there's a number of different approaches to this, but this uses a lot of online resources, but it's very private and secure, and what you say isn't stored anywhere or sent to anyone. It's all using the power of artificial intelligence, which is really cool. So I'm going to click the Dictate button, and I'm not sure how this will interact with the narrator I have running, but we'll see. So now I'm going to start dictating, and I can tell that the narrator is attempting to say everything I'm doing, and I'm not sure how to switch that off, though I'm sure some of the listeners do. So I'm practicing by tricking it by speaking faster than it can, so that it can start reading out. Now I can put a comma in, and I can even say full stop and new paragraph. Now, by saying lots of random dictation features there, you'll notice that it did put in the full stop and it did go into a new paragraph. But of course, I do the traditional Irish before I say the next sentence. And it's put in an A because it thinks that's what I must have wanted. And, it's fascinating to me that I never think about punctuation when I'm writing, but I naturally do it when I'm typing, Oh, it's time for a new paragraph, there's my full stop. But I don't think in my head, full stop. So you have this new experience where you have to say full stop, and it actually makes you think about your reading in a different way. Now, I spoke very fast there, and if we were to get the narrator to read it out.
So now I'm going to start dictating, and I can tell the generator is attempting to say everything I'm.
That's just one sentence. And again, I just spoke fairly fast. You didn't hear my proper speaking voice for dictation. I just rambled on and spoke with my loud accent, and it flew through it. And that, the improvement in dictation recognition by what you're saying is phenomenal. Now, I can't guarantee it'll work for every Irish accent, okay?
As long as it works for loud accents, though.
Look, it took hundreds of scientists, dozens of years to make it work for the Dundalk accent, but okay, we're getting there. And, but it's incredible to see these little advances add up to big things over time. And that wasn't a feature in Word. You could dictate to Word, but didn't have these AI features until recently.
Yes. Okay. Oh, that's great.
Hi,
Thanks.
Hi, Stephen. It's Joe here. I'm actually a visually impaired user of Microsoft computers, and I'm really pleased to see the improvement in narrator over the last few years. I think it's getting to the stage actually where people can buy a Microsoft computer without spending money on a third-party screen reader. Almost to that stage. I noticed today when I turned it on, I'm a user of JAWS, so I suppose stick with JAWS. But it's good to see that I could turn on a Windows computer, turn on narrator with Control Windows and Enter, and I'll be able to use the PC. So I also noticed today when I turned on a narrator that it tried to copy the settings from my other screen readers on my machine so that it will make the computer work the way I normally use it, which I think that's a great introduction. That it means I don't have to go messing around with settings, speeding up devices, and maybe changing punctuation settings. I thought that was a good.
That's fantastic to hear, and I didn't actually know that because I don't have other screen readers installed. Though I do whenever I'm learning with, say, Donald Fitzpatrick. He's had me install them so I could learn. But I'd say he nearly gave up teaching after that experience, after trying to teach me. But the thing is that I didn't know that, and that's really interesting. The main thing I've seen in the change in the approach to a lot of our software is personalization and productivity, that you should be allowed to do it the way you want to do it. And if you're got a particular setting you like, we should attempt to not remove that feature in that setting. We should attempt to support you on it. And then the other thing is that what makes you more productive? And if this makes you more productive, it's something we should support. So, making everyone in the world as productive as possible with our technology is a goal for everyone in Microsoft.
There was a stage a few years ago. I don't remember the exact timeline, but I suppose narrator used to only read menus, which got you so far, but then you needed a third-party screen reader. Now, we can go to the Microsoft Edge browser and we can actually read the information off the page and fill in a form field, or maybe make a purchase, or whatever you want to do on an internet web page. You know what I mean? But and of course, that stage now where it's actually usable,
Oh, absolutely. And I'm pleased to see that there's more and more investment in these technologies and accessibility. You could be very cynical and just say, we'll tick a box, it's accessible. And how do you know? Well, we asked someone and they said it was, but that's not good enough. It needs to be software that can be used by someone with a brand new computer out of the box, and not a case of, oh, well, you're going to have to go and do either spend a lot of money or do a lot of work before you can actually work with your new computer.
Yeah. In the case of reading voices, as you mentioned already, it's fairly welcome because, as you said, in some cases a robotic voice is good, but look, as you said, reading news articles and stuff like that, it's good to have a voice you can listen to for a longer period of time.
Can I do a little demo then of that, because it might be of interest to the audience?
Microsoft App Bar, new tab.
So,
Windows keyboard short.
I've lost my Windows tab. There we go.
New tab. Microsoft Edge window. App bar. Address and search bar. Edit.
So what I want to do here, and I'm afraid I have to turn off narrator for this bit because we tested it earlier on, and we need to turn off the narrator just so we can hear the new AI voice, but I will turn it back on after that. I hope that's okay. And what I'm going to here, everyone can actually go to in their web browser, so it's not a top secret site I have. And what I'm going to is the cognitive services, which is what we call AI on our Microsoft Cloud, which we call Azure, A-Z-U-R-E. I'm Irish, I'm probably not pronouncing it right, but if I scroll down, I have a section called Speech, and I love this new feature, because text-to-speech is what we call in programming, if you're a developer, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's an API. And what an API is, it's Application Programmer's Interface, which means you don't have to know how it works to use it. You can actually send a piece of text to this, and it will send back a voice reading it out. So I'm going to go down to a little demo, and this is the cool bit, because I can put any text I want in, and I know you can't hear a screen reader right now, but I've switched it off for a reason. So I'm going to say welcome. Oh, I can't spell. WELCOME to the NCBI Labs podcast. We are delighted to. Oh, I need to get better at typing, folks. I forgot a space. We are delighted to meet you. Okay, and I put an exclamation mark in at the end of "we are delighted to meet you." Now, if I look over on the right, I can see that language can be specified, and we have quite a range of languages. But right now, it's on English US. The voice is Jenny, and there's also 6 other voices, but some of them are like Aria with no neural after them. And the word neural tells us that it's an AI generated voice as opposed to a computationally generated voice like we had back in the 80s. So if I go with Aria and we listen to this, this is traditional voice reader voice that you've probably heard, a screen reader voice, probably heard, in lots of different ways on Windows.
Welcome to the NCBI Labs podcast. We are delighted to meet you.
So a little bit robotic, you might agree. And if we go down to English Ireland and we select poor old Sean, we've been listening to Sean already quite a bit, but let's hear Sean again.
Welcome to the NCBI Labs podcast. We are delighted to meet you.
Now, Sean sounds a bit like me in the mornings, but if we go to Connor, who is a neural voice, this used lots of Irish accents to generate a voice. It's not one particular point. There's no actual Connor now. Connor's not real.
Welcome to the NCBI Labs podcast. We are delighted to meet you.
Now, we can also try Emily. Now, Emily has a very breathy voice at the end of her sentences. So,
welcome to the NCBI Labs podcast. We are delighted to meet you.
Now, you might say, well, actually, we want an Australian presenter. We're fed up, JP, you're not sounding Australian enough. Oh, okay. And we can do that.
Welcome to the NCBI Labs podcast. We are delighted to meet you.
Now, I actually played that for an Australian lecturer and his class, and he said he sounded like a posh Australian. And I'm very impressed that anyone can recognize the differences, because all I could get was Australian. So I was impressed by that. But if we go back to English US, we can even change the voice style. So just I have general assistant, chat, customer service, and newscast. So let's go with the newscast.
Welcome to the NCBI Labs podcast. We are delighted to meet you.
Which is very formal. But if we go back to chatty voice, chat.
Welcome to the NCBI Labs podcast. We are delighted to meet you.
So really, it's a formal type of sound. And it's fascinating to me that you can actually build cheerful and professional narration voices and casual newscast. I'm not quite sure what all the differences of those would be, but let's try one more.
Welcome to the NCBI Labs podcast. We are delighted to meet you.
And that was cheerful from Aria. Okay, so there you go. Now, I'm sorry I had the narrator off, but I just wanted you to hear the different AI voices without it stopping me playing them every time. And I will switch the narrator on now in a moment. But that AI, and that's for speech and language, which you just heard with dictation. But the same thing is happening with vision. So you can bring a photograph into PowerPoint and it will tell you what it thinks it is using the same technology, only it's doing vision instead of speech.
Well, could you demonstrate that for us now, Stephen?
I absolutely could. I'm going to show it in
great. Thank you.
PowerPoint as opposed to on the website, if that's okay, because the website shows computer code and I don't want to traumatize anyone. However, if there is anyone listening who says, I'm a coder, I'm interested, especially playing it back after the thing. My day job is showing people how to write AI programs with the cloud. And if any of this is inspiring to you, or if you've seen the Seeing AI app and you've gone, I want to know how to make that, then I would love to talk to the developers. And maybe you're a student and you're thinking of being a developer someday. I'm talking to you too. Or maybe, you know, you're an old developer like me and you're saying, hey, I wouldn't mind doing some AI, you know, might make a change from all the banking programs I write or whatever it is. Well, then get in touch with me separately after the podcast. I'm sure JP and folks will share my details, because it's a separate conversation, but I'm just going to do a quick demo. So I'm going to turn the narrator back on for this.
Starting our text-to-speech Microsoft Azure, Word, Microsoft Edge window, Microsoft Edge, text-to-speech Microsoft Azure.
And we are going to PowerPoint.
Slide pane, slide 1.
And I have a blank PowerPoint presentation, which is on screen now. And I need to just point out a couple of things here. And one thing I didn't show in Word was to show that to make a structured document, you should use styles, because that lets the navigation pane generate metadata about your document. But a lot of people don't realize is the same thing happens in PowerPoint. So in PowerPoint, we have a concept called the layout of a slide.
Layout, menu.
And
Presentation 1, PowerPoint window, office theme, title and content.
And we have title and content, content header, to content, comparison, and each one is just a structure of a slide, and it has placeholders for things. And I notice a lot of students completely ignore those, delete them, and insert text boxes where they think they will look better. Now that's fine, and I always say to my students, once Donald Fitzpatrick explained this to me, is that when you click Accessibility Checker in PowerPoint, it detects where you're using the structure of the layout of the document on each slide if you've filled in all the bits. If you've deleted them, it has nothing to go on. So it goes, well, I don't know what order to read this out in. Yours, good luck to your screen reader. So it's a little thing, but don't just delete everything and start with a blank slide. And I am 100% guilty of that in all of my presentations till I learned that. But in this scenario, I'm going to add an image, and we're going to see that when I click Insert and Pictures
menu, Presentation 1, PowerPoint window, insert picture from this device, menu item.
And I'm selecting
picture dialog, file name, slide pane, picture 10.
And this picture is from 5 years ago, and it's my daughter Molly, and it's a little girl, and she's sitting in a field that we've just baled, so it's big hay bales, big round ones, and she was quite small, so I had to put her up in the hay bale because, you know, she's so tall now she could probably jump over the hay bale, but not back then. Now, if I put that image on a slide and I just sent it to Donal and expected Donal to figure it out for himself, that would be a very, very inaccessible use of the features. And if I right-click
Context menu, Presentation 1, PowerPoint window, edit all text, menu item.
If I edit all text, because it detected I'd added an image and it didn't know what it was, it automatically sent the image to a Vision AI service, which has returned the following piece of text. It's a child sitting in a field.
All text, description, edit box. A child sitting in a field, description automatically generated with low confidence. A child sitting in a field selected.
So I've selected it's a child sitting in a field, and show you how we got that and delete it. I have a button. When I delete that field, it says, okay, if this dude doesn't write in what it is, we'll have to do it for him. And it has a big button, generate a description for me, which I will now click.
Mark as decorative checkbox unchecked.
And it comes back with a child sitting in a field. Now, to show you that I'm not cheating here, that I had that image and I told it what it was.
Slide 1, a child sitting in a field, description automatically generated with low confidence.
I'm inserting a new image.
Pictures, Presentation 1, PowerPoint window,
completely
insert
different.
From this device, menu item, insert picture dialog, file, slide pane, slide 1.
It's from the farm, and it generates alt text automatically. And I'm going to click
Presentation 1, PowerPoint window, edit all text, description, edit box, a group of chickens, description automatically generated, end of line.
And, you know, it is a group of chickens. It's 6 of our chickens, and they are absolutely the best pets ever. And they give us a huge amount of eggs, and that was on a snowy day. Now, you'll notice that even though the chickens are standing on snow, the description doesn't have anything about snow. So this is the cool little thing I can tell you, is that the fact that they're standing on snow is detected and sent back to PowerPoint, but PowerPoint says I'm only going to show a single descriptive sentence. But if you're a programmer, you can get all that information, and you could maybe build a more powerful system, not for PowerPoint, but for your own things that could do that. And that's really interesting.
And Stephen, do you think that could become like native to Windows, where on any context menu, if we right-clicked an image or Shift F10 on an image, we could down arrow to image description?
Well, let me say two things on that. One, I can't confirm or deny if that's a feature I know is coming up, because I can't comment on that. But what I could say is if you were a developer, you could build that yourself and build it fairly quickly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Now you might say, look, I'm not a developer. That's fair enough. And not everyone's a developer. But people like me look at that and go, okay, I actually could build that. And, you know, whether or not it's worth your time and effort to build it is another thing, but you could do it. And that's the real power of the cloud and AI, that this is actually a service that we offer out to other people. And do I have time to show Immersive Reader?
That'll be great. I was going to say there's a couple of things: the Immersive Reader and possibly the accessibility checker as well. If you wouldn't mind, Stephen. Yeah.
So I'm going to mention just on accessibility checker, and that's an important one. This is now in Word, and it's in PowerPoint, and it's in Outlook, and it's in other things as well. But that's the three main places I use it. Okay. And what accessibility checker is it's just the peace of mind that you haven't missed something before you publish something. So it could be sending an email, it could be handing up an essay to your lecturer, like Donald Fitzpatrick, who's going to use the navigating pane to read it. Or it might be you're putting it on a website, you don't know who's going to read it. And, you know, someone could come along and read it in years to come and say, I couldn't follow any of that because it wasn't an accessible document. So what the accessibility checker lets you do, and it's
slide pane, slide 1,
under
description
review.
Automatically generated.
I'm going to close that little pane there. Is check accessibility, and accessibility checker looks at your entire document and tells you if you've forgotten something. For instance, to fill in an area that it expects to be filled in, or to generate alt text for an image, or even the order is not clear of items you've placed on the screen. And I'm going to tell you, you know, we had an interesting experience with this. So we had 104 slides that every single employee had to read before they could be allowed to go back to the office post-COVID in Ireland. And every country had to do this. And a colleague of mine had made the slides, and they're very good on accessibility. And they had checked everything on accessibility except the order. And it turned out that even though we had alt text for the images, that wasn't enough. And we ended up having to change the order of items on every single slide, or else it wouldn't be published because it didn't meet the accessibility guidelines. It didn't matter if no one was going to use that feature. It had to meet it, you know, and that was really, really important. So I'm going to hit check accessibility. And guys, it's not a good result, I'm afraid. Missing slide title. I haven't put in slide title. And intelligence services have suggested alternative text for me, and they have. And that's kind of a hint. You know, you want to check that they're right, because maybe it says that's not chickens, that's a, you know, a line or something, you know, and I need to check that. And you can leave that accessibility checker running while you work, and it appears on the bottom left of my screen at all times, a little button that I can click, and it says, Chuck, you need to investigate, the status is not good. That's also in Word, and when I have it that every time I send an email in Outlook, it does the accessibility check, and it can even detect if someone says, I'd like to receive emails that are accessible. So it says, look, you're sending an email here, you know, to JP. JP wants an accessible email, and you better go fix that. So that's the accessibility checker is built into lots of different parts of Office, and I think you'll see it in more and more features going forward. Anything where you create content, it's going to be an important feature.
Great. Thanks for that, Steve. You're going to mention the Immersive Reader.
Okay, so Immersive Reader might
learning tools. OneNote for Windows 10 window. Challenging sentences. Content block 2 of 4. Editing.
So when I'm usually showing this,
give control button.
Talking about dyslexia, believe it or not. And I know we're not talking about dyslexia here, but there's similar interesting features that, even though it was developed for dyslexia, will be of interesting to low vision users. So OneNote, and by the way, the thing I'm showing here is called Immersive Reader, and it came from a hackathon a few years ago in Microsoft. And you've also heard of Seeing AI, which came from a hackathon in Microsoft. So the hackathons at Microsoft happen every July for a week long, and they've happened at least as long as I've been in Microsoft, which is going on 8 years now. And you know, I love taking part in them, and I've been very honored to take part in them because they are the things that you you learn and do are incredible. And I highly recommend, if you've never done a hackathon, to get involved in one. You don't have to be a coder, but try and get involved with one. If you want me to come and do a hackathon with you, I'll absolutely do that. I love them. But what I want to show here is something that started as a hackathon idea, but has actually grown into something that's integrated into, I think, 17 of our products at last count, including Minecraft. So let me show you what it is. I've a list of sentences here that are difficult sentences if you're learning English. I had to console my mum after I sold her console.
Learning tools. OneNote for Windows 10 window. Challenging sentences. Content block 1 of 3. Editing.
And if I was to imagine taking a sentence like that and trying to parse it, it's fine for me because, like, I actually, believe it or not, in Loud, I grew up speaking a variant of English. It's probably not exactly English, but it's close enough. And of course, the sentence is not true. It's an example. I would never sell my mum's Xbox. I love my mum. I would never sell her Xbox. But the thing is that, it is a difficult sentence to parse. But it's even more difficult if it's hard to read because someone has sent you a black and white document with a small font and that you can't read. So we have a button called Immersive Reader, and I'm going to click that button now. And at first,
content information, play button.
At first, it doesn't seem that different. It's still black and white. It has a play button, which I will click now for you.
I had to console my mum after I sold her console. There's simply no use for something you can't use. They were going to project the project at the local theatre.
So each sentence is a difficult sentence, but Immersive Reader is really cool because it changes how the document looks to just the user on this current device and does not change the underlying document. So you might have experienced, if you're using a computer and someone sends you a Word document and maybe you have low vision, you make the fonts bigger and you change the colors to just get it right. And you send it back with the edits because you're collaborating and they say, what'd you do to my document? It looks awful. I'm going to have to hand this up to the professor. And you're going, well, wait a minute. I needed to do that to read it and edit it.
Yeah.
So what this lets you do is change how it looks. It's non-editing. It's non-destructive. It doesn't change anything. So I have text preferences.
Text size. Use Alt plus arrow keys to change the text size.
Slider at 20.
Text size.
42. Tabbed pane group header. Design ideas tab item. Accessibility tab item.
And each number you heard there being called out was me changing the font size without having to select it and, select the bit I want to change and then change the font and then make it smaller again. I can also change the font here to Comic Sans.
Font, Comic Sans.
Radio button.
I'm not sure I'd recommend that, but it might help, for certain people. And I've changed the colors to be pink.
Themes, radio group, or.
And so there's a pink background, which is easier to read. But I also have grammar options
switch off.
For people who say, look, can you just highlight the nouns?
Switch off.
Nouns, verbs.
Switch on.
And we also have adjectives and adverbs in different colors to help. And then the best one is if you have a user who maybe you're teaching, or maybe they're a refugee to Ireland, or maybe they've come to live in Ireland and they don't speak any English. Well, you can actually translate the document, either the whole document or by word, for them into a huge number of languages, including Irish. So I'm not saying anyone listening to this would need help with their Irish.
Choose a language for translation.
Combo box.
Irish. Line focus. Translate words to Irish.
Switch off.
Line focus.
OneNote page.
Now, the only thing is it won't read out Irish to you, but it will read it out in a variety of languages. And the final feature of Immersive Reader and OneNote that I think that you might be interested in is
content block 2 of 7.
I have a photograph here of the first page of Harry Potter. Okay, and it's Harry Potter. The first page is the boy who lived. I don't know if you've ever read it. I will admit I didn't read it, but I listened. I saw the movies and I listened to Stephen Fry narrate every single book on everything over to America and back. So if I right click on this,
rotate like 90 degrees button.
Another feature of AI, I can copy the text from the picture.
Learning tools, content, V,
and paste it.
Content block 4 of 8, editing, lived.
So I now have the entire text that was in that photograph copied and pasted, and I can edit it and change it or whatever it was. I don't think you should change Harry Potter, but if you needed to make a report on it and you wanted to take a quote, you can do that now instead of typing it and getting it wrong. And in fact, the Immersive Reader would even read it out with that nice Irish, AI accent, not Stephen Fry, but you can have it read out to you in an Australian accent if you want, posh or otherwise. And that is just, showing how AI is going from, here's a photograph, and it could be in a language I don't speak. Can I right click copy the text out, paste it, translate it into English, and read it out to me. And all of these features are happening because of AI, but they're built into OneNote. They're included. You don't pay extra for these features. They're just standard features that are in there. And we have little kids using these features who don't realize that they're actually using incredibly powerful AI behind the scenes all the time. So they were the main features I'd hope to show you. And of course, check accessibility is in there with, is this OneNote I've just made with all this information I want to give to my colleague, is it accessible? And it'll do that accessibility check for you.
Great. Well, thanks for running through those features. There's been one or two questions that have come in that you might be able to help with there, Stephen. One is from Thomas, and he's asked a question about the Xbox console, as it happens.
Okay.
He said, what are some of the accessibility options that could be found in the Xbox console for screen reader users?
So this is something I'm very passionate about, because when I'm not in Microsoft, a big hobby for me is gaming, and I used to be a games lecturer, and I'm doing a PhD in UCD with a group called Smart Lab, who are absolutely amazing, and they're very much focused on accessibility and inclusive software. And what my research is on gaming with your body, that, you know, using cameras that track and let you make games with your body. But we recognize that not everyone can game on an Xbox. So how do we make it so that as many people as possible can game? So the one thing
challenging sentences.
I'm going to just check, and if I'm on camera now, I don't know if I'm on camera, but I'm going to hold up the Xbox accessibility controller. Now this is a controller aimed at a feature called, you can completely game on your own with this controller by adding in switches that you are able to physically interact with. So let's say you don't have access to full mobility or range of mobility in your hands to hold a traditional controller. I'm going to hold a traditional Xbox controller up. This is the new blue one. I don't have the new red one yet, but I do want it. And the thing is that when I'm using it, I have to, and I'm getting on a bit, but you know, I'm able to play games by pressing the buttons, and sometimes I'm not as fast as pressing them as the four kids who beat me at everything. The reason is I'm getting old and can't press the buttons as fast, not that I'm just suck at games. But the one feature I want to mention is Copilot. So Copilot lets you press the buttons you can press while someone else presses the buttons they can press, so that together you can control the character and play the game. Now, where does that come to when it comes to low vision, being blind and trying to game, and Xbox screen readers? So there is game narration, which for any text that appears on the screen will be read out. Now, not all games support it, though a lot of the Microsoft Studio games do. So games like big games that, and there's a list of them online you can check, but big games that you might have heard of, like in the Minecraft and Minecraft Dungeons and Gears of War, and games that have text appearing. That is a feature that we're trying to get more and more game studios that produce games on Xbox. And remember, we don't develop all the games on Xbox, other people do. But it is a feature. And one thing that I've been using a lot recently is I was playing a game, and it's not made by Microsoft. I won't mention the game in case I'm not supposed to, but it was far too hard for me. And it had an accessibility section I'd never seen before. And they were all physical game playing accessibility things, like, are you too old to point the gun properly? Well, you can click this button. And you're like, okay. And then it kept saying, are you sure you want to do that? Like, because the game won't be as good if you do that. And I'm like, I'm only clicking this because I know I need it. Don't shame me because I clicked on that button. So these features should be integrated. And the one thing I've been thinking about in games myself, and I don't make games anymore or even teach people to make games, but the one thing I want to think about, and I think I'd love Thomas's opinions on this, is that there's a lot of games where they're sort of what I call twitch gaming, where you have to be really fast and point at the guy and shoot the guy. And I don't really like games like that. I like games with lots of like role-playing games, with lots of thinking and conversations and figuring out where to go. And I see a lot of those games could absolutely be made accessible and playable. You know, if you just took the approach that screen readers on Xbox would not be an unreasonable thing. But there's another type of game where there's someone in your ear, usually a fake character, saying, you know, go here, do, oh, the monster's over there, do this. And what if that was an actual person who was playing maybe on their computer with a screen reader, which allowed them to say, okay, team, I'm getting an alert that there's the enemy is on the left, you should go right, or whatever it is. And then suddenly you're an integral part of the team, even though you can't do the point and shoot really quick, but you can be the person guiding them because you have access to information they don't, and how well you communicate makes the game.
That's a great idea.
Interesting concept. Yeah.
I know we had we looked at Microsoft Ear Hockey before because it was an audio-based game, and we looked at some other audio-based games. And I think Thomas was also alluding to the fact that on Xbox you're adding in accessibility controls, like you're mentioning, like the speech to text, or even an inbuilt magnifier. But even something as simple as having a high contrast menu option that's there, and you can change the game to a high contrast menu, or the Xbox's native menu itself to high contrast. I think that really helps. And
I can't mention any upcoming features, but what I will say the following, because this is public knowledge, is that you can see job ads in Microsoft by going to careers.microsoft.com. And by the way, in Ireland, we've like 190 jobs open at the moment, and I would love some techies listening to think about applying. We'd be very interested. But if you see, I often see jobs over in America that if I was in America, I'd apply for, and a lot of them say accessibility, design, and Xbox. So I think there's something happening. I can't tell you what it is, but I think something's happening, and I love seeing it. I don't have any secret insider knowledge that I'm not sharing with you, but I can see the job ads and I go, isn't that really interesting that they're hiring in this area?
We'll have to read between the lines there on that one. But we're actually opening up a centre of excellence in Tallaght. We are kitting it out with the latest technologies for people to try, like from smart TVs to like Alexa type devices, and basically everything. So we would love to have an Xbox there to try out, and anything accessible wise would be fantastic. And
well, I'm not sure if that's genuine or Sean just really wants to play some Xbox on a big smart telly. But I'm delighted to hear that. And you should follow up with me after this. I want to hear more about that. Did you say in Tallaght?
In Tallaght, yeah, we've an NCBI office in Tallaght, and we've launched a new centre of excellence. So, we have a lot of equipment in there. We've a lot of we've got 5 or 6 PCs. We have CCTVs, handheld magnifiers, smart TVs, smart devices, and we're just trying to kit out the room as much as possible. Smart lighting. Just like everyday experience for someone. So it's not always things that are like, here's a CCTV built for someone with sight loss. It's like, here is a television that you can actually turn a screen reader on, and the whole family's using the television. I don't have to ask someone then to change the channel or go through an EPG for me. And we're just trying to explore all avenues now. And we're going to have an open day as soon as
you can.
As soon as open days are allowed again. So we'd love to invite you to it if you could make it.
Well, I'd love to be invited, and I'm just going to say I don't know Tallaght extremely well, but I was actually a lecturer in what was IT Tallaght and is now TU Dublin Tallaght for 11 years. And, the only thing I knew about Tallaght before I started there is it had a square shopping centre that I'd never seen, but when I got there, it wasn't square. But the first time I was ever in Tallaght in my life was doing an interview for that job. And the second time I was ever in Tallaght was to start lecturing there, because it's an hour away from where I live. But it was a big part of my life for 11 years. So I'm delighted to hear that's coming to Tallaght, and I think it'll be amazing. I would love to see it, and please invite me. That would be something that I think there would be a big crew in Microsoft who would love to see that and be very interested.
And just to let you know, like I was there yesterday, and it's the last stop on the Lewis. That's how I know where our office in Tallaght is. And I did happen to get the wrong Lewis out to Sagart, so that's on me. I should have been using an app like Microsoft Soundscape to navigate my way there, but I just got on the wrong Lewis and had to backtrack. But no, we'll definitely. It's very easy to access, and once you know the location, and we'd be delighted if you could make it.
Yeah. Absolutely. And
live event 30.
Oh, turning off poor old narrator. Now, so I've just stopped sharing my screen, and you mentioned Soundscape. I know there were some questions on Soundscape. Yeah. If I can. If I are on Seeing AI, I'm happy to chat about them as well, but I have limited knowledge on Soundscape, but I am happy to chat about it.
Yeah, great. We might even bring in Joe here as well.
That's okay. Just it hasn't been released in Ireland yet, as Joe will tell us now. But I know, Joe, you've been involved in some testing with this app.
Yeah, I've been involved in some testing for Microsoft Soundscape. They're currently testing if the Irish voice is suitable, the Irish accent on Apple devices, and they're just making sure that the street preview, when you can search for a street and previewed before you go there, all that kind of stuff is working before they release it. So look, we'll be hoping, well, I'm hoping it'll be released by the summer or something like that. And I think COVID has held it back a little bit also. But I've been testing it and it does work extremely well. The really pleasing thing about it is it's got stereo. It works in a stereo sound. So I've used it with AirPods Pro, for example. And if I walk down the street and the things on my left-hand side will be announced in my left ear. So it'll say maybe the Steps bar is on my left ear, and then on the right-hand side it'll say in my right ear it'll say the Bank of Ireland is on my right. It'll tell you all the little service roads, which most service road would be like a little laneway that going into between two houses or something like that. Whereas most navigation apps won't mention those. You know, you can actually turn it off, that feature, if you want to, but I find it quite useful. It's just it's a different experience of using a navigation app to other ones I've used, and the fact that it announces things in different in both ears like that and in stereo makes it a lot more, I suppose, makes it more of an experience, makes it more of a real experience, and points out the points of interest in a better way, and you can imagine them better in your head if you were totally blind, even, you know. So
that's really interesting, and it's such a small thing, you know, but when you explain it like that, it makes a big difference. Yeah, it makes I just you can focus on where the actual point of interest is better. I think it's just, in whatever way the voice announces it, if it's farther away, kind of, it just announces it in such a way that it makes it more real, you know. Also, when you come up to an intersection, it'll say, okay, Green Street is on your left, and it'll be saying it in your left ear, and Mill Street is on your right, and it's saying in your right ear, and you just kind of, you don't even think about left and right, you know what I mean? It's just giving you that signal. I don't have an iPhone, I have an Android, and I have Jabra earpods, which I find brilliant. They have a stereo and a mono setting, and I can have one attached to the phone and one attached to the computer, and I'm using them right now. But I'd be very interested to know, would it work with that type of technology too? That's brilliant. And I just, the one thing, I reached out to the team because I knew there was interest in Soundscape. Well, my colleague reached out to the team and they came back and they, just, you know, one thing to note, they are working on getting a release for Ireland in 2021, and I know COVID, I think, has held up a lot of plans for a lot of people, but so hopefully that will happen. And they, you know, they wanted to point out that they, you know, really appreciate and love the collaboration that has happened with the NCBI and Chantel and Joe. It's you know, these things don't happen unless you have, you know, brilliant partners who can help and test and develop and make it something that's actually useful and not just, you know, something that we made but no one actually wanted it, you know. So it's phenomenal to hear you're working with them. Thank you so much, Joe. And you know, I can't wait to get you know, my hands on this too. So it's absolutely brilliant to hear it.
It's great. As you're saying, Jabra stereo headset, it will work with those, and more than likely it also works with aftershocks, which allow, we say, a blind person needs access to their ears, I suppose. So the aftershocks headphones use your inner ear, so it'll be placed on your bone of your ear, and
use a bone conductive technology. Yeah.
Bone conductive, and it leaves your
that's
ear holes
science
free.
fiction. Science fiction to me, because I remember reading about that in an Arthur C. Clarke book, you know, like a million years ago when I was a little kid, and now it's just a product you can buy. It's just incredible.
Yeah. And also the AirPods Pro have a transparency mode, so you can hold the stem on your AirPods, and when it switches to transparency mode, it also lets in the noises from outside the earphone as well as inside. So you can hear the leaves rustling and the wind while you're also listening to the soundscape, you know.
I don't know if I should.
Cars coming by also, which is more important.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I was going to say, but like I have a setting here allowed on the Jabra, and when I switch it on, I don't tell my wife this, but my wife is very softly spoken, and when she's mad at me, it's even worse. So I switch that on, and it acts like a hearing aid to hear just what she's giving out to me about. It's just amazing. Whereas the kids are very loud, so when they start shouting, I just switch it off again. So, no, it's phenomenal that the advances in these technology, and like I have a HoloLens here, which is for holograms and augmented reality, and a lot of this stuff like I was reading about when I was a student, and it was like Neil Stephenson's Snow Crash. It was absolute science fiction, and now that's a product you can buy, and if you're a developer, you can build stuff with it, and it's nearly commonplace now, and it's wonderful to see that, and I want to see the same thing happen with accessibility. So these conversations are very important.
I think Marty McFly in Back from the Future, he had a tablet in his hand in one of the scenes, I think, and I don't think any people thought that was like 30 years in the future.
Well, look, I still don't have a hoverboard, so like when I
yeah, not real ones, but they have imitation. So that's
yeah. So I've seen a few people in Dublin on them, and I thought I don't know if that'll catch on in Loud now, especially with the tractors, but like maybe someday. Yeah, I was listening. Someone was telling me about Soundscape. It might have been Donal and Fitzpatrick, who has taught me an awful lot that I need to know. And it was just incredible to me because I live on a farm in the middle of the woods, and if I go outside and I stand in my field, Soundscape is not going to tell me anything's on my left or right for a long time. A lot of walking before it'll say anything. And but absolutely, if you're trying to avoid traffic and you're in Dublin, and like I get lost in Dublin regularly because I'm a culture who is a bit frightened of going to Dublin. When I do go there, I can't find anything. Yet I can't imagine how difficult it would be when I can't find the signs where I want to go, or so it's this is absolutely integral to your experience of being independent and going somewhere. So it's definitely something.
Stop you there for a second. You said you can't. You're in the middle of a field. Well, actually, you can set a place marker. So if you're at the gate of the field and you couldn't find where the other gate was, you can set a place marker in Soundscape, and it'll navigate you back to the gate. So,
well, we do have lots of gates in the field, and we have to have them.
The closer you get to the gate, you get a little beacon noise, So
that's brilliant. That's brilliant. I genuinely do want to test this out now because yesterday my 10-year-old is very sad that since we got the chickens, the dog, who is a golden retriever, is very upset. He spends all day staring at them out the window, like in a rage. And he's caught one, and it did not end well for the poor old chicken. So yesterday he escaped. The poor 10-year-old let him out, and of course it's pandemonium here. Everyone goes running out. Everyone's holding a lead, trying to catch dog. Dog didn't go near the chickens. Dog thought, freedom, I'm going for an outrun. Now he's too old to run, but he went for it anyway. And we came back covered in mud after managing to finally catch the poor old dog. And the dog thought this was a great holiday. He was a golden retriever, but he was quite dark brown from swimming in various things he shouldn't have been by the time we caught him. And my 17-year-old said, can we not put something on the dog that would track him? And I said, then what would we do? He's still going to be swimming in the bog, He's still going to be rolling around in something he shouldn't be. That's not going to help. 17-year-old said, yeah, but I'd know exactly where to go without having to, walk around shouting for the dog. And I just thought, you know what, he's probably right. There should be a way that I can put a tracker on a dog or any animal and find them when they get lost, Whereas, shepherds have lasted a long time without trackers on the sheep. But, nowadays, maybe technology solutions to make our lives simpler and easier aren't that bad of an idea. If you see that I've an Internet of Things solution for a lost chicken, it was me who had that big need and had to develop it.
Great. You'll have to put a tag around their leg, I think. That's the way it'll go, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd rather put a rope around the dog and keep him chained up than let him eat a poor chicken,
Yeah.
Stephen, before we finish up, is there a way for, say, some of our listeners to contact you or Microsoft, any comments you might have or suggestions based on what we're talking about today?
Well, absolutely. So for nearly every product, there's an official way to contact the team that make that. So I'm not making any of these products. But if you want to talk to me about anything to do with accessibility in Ireland, and I'm not speaking for the UK or any other country. So if you're listening from another country, there's someone else better than me. But if you're in Ireland and you want to reach out and ask a question, and the questions you can ask me range from, I want to be a computer programmer doing AI for accessibility. What do I study in college? Well, you can contact me about that, all the way to I'm using this accessibility package from Microsoft, and it's not working for me. I need help. And that, that's quite a range of things, but it's generally, you can absolutely get in touch with me. You can share my email rather than me read it out. It's Stephen with a PH, so STEPHEN .Howell HOWELL at Microsoft.com. But I know you'll share that in the notes, and that is much easier. And you can absolutely email me and say, can you support me? Now, sometimes I'll redirect you to somewhere else, and sometimes I'll be able to help you. I'll just give you one example. Recently, out of the blue on Twitter, I got a request for help with Teams from a user who's blind, and nothing to do with the NCBI as far as I know. They just got in contact, and I offered to do a training session, and they said, can they bring their friends? And I think we ended up with 4 or 5 different people on, including people that I had met in Microsoft, like Stuart, and it was just brilliant to be able to do that. And it's just a small thing.
Collaboration.
Excellent. But it's just, hey, you need some help. Let me see if I can help you, and you can absolutely get in touch with me for that. And of course, if it's a big, important, I'm buying a big thing and I need help with a big thing, I'll put you in touch with the right people. It won't be me helping you, but I'll do my best to find the right people for you.
Excellent. Great. Well, Stephen, thanks a lot for joining us today. Thanks, Stephen. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll see you again when the opening of the Tala office happens.
I'm looking forward to it. Thanks very much, folks.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Stephen. Great. So we're nearly finished today with our live event. Just before we go, a few things just to run through. As a reminder, if you require any technology support of the Labs team, you can contact our help desk on 1850 92 30 60, or you can send us an email to labs@ncbi.ie. Or to avail of the wider services from NCBI, you can call us on 1850 33 43 53, or you can email info@ncbi.ie. If you'd like to make a donation to NCBI to keep our services going, you can visit our donate.ncbi.ie page, or even if you'd like to sponsor one of our live events, you can send us an email to labs@ncbi.ie. So what will be coming up in the next few weeks? Well, lots of interesting things coming up in the next few live events, including a very exciting new accessibility feature soon to be released by Sky Ireland that we're really looking forward to telling you about. We'll also be talking about app development. So, for example, what are some of the key things to consider when building an accessible app, and how can you get involved in that process to affect change? So all this and more to come in the coming weeks. And just before we finish as well, I'd like to point out that our next live event will be taking place on Tuesday, the 13th of April. So that means there'll be no live event next week after the Easter bank holiday weekend. As a reminder, if you'd like to stay up to date with what's coming up in our future live events and keep informed of latest tech news for people with sight loss, you can subscribe to our weekly technology newsletter by visiting our website ncbi.ie, or by sending an email to labs@ncbi.ie. So that's about it for today. Thanks to thank our panel of Sean, Joe, and our guest speaker, Stephen Howell from Microsoft, and of course, everyone for listening in as well. So take care, everyone. Enjoy the Easter weekend, and we look forward to having you back with us in 2 weeks' time for the next NCBI Labs live event.